two incomes should make you richer. That's the basic logic. If more money comes in, more money should be left over. If more money is left over, you invest more, and if you invest more, you build wealth faster. It sounds simple. It sounds mathematical. It sounds unquestionable. But then an uncomfortable question appears. Why do so many dual-income couples live under pressure, in debt, and constantly afraid of losing a job? How is it possible that families who earn good money still feel like they're always chasing their bills? The truth is that for many people, the second income didn't create freedom, it created dependence. It didn't build wealth, it built obligations. It didn't bring security, it created structural fragility. And the most dangerous part, this happens silently. You don't notice it at first. On the contrary, everything seems to be improving. The house gets better, the car gets better, the neighborhood gets better, the school gets better, the standard of living rises. Life seems to be evolving. But there is a huge difference between upgrading your lifestyle and building wealth. Today, you're going to understand why the two-income model may be sabotaging your financial stability and how to turn that same structure into one of the most powerful strategies to accelerate your freedom. Because the problem isn't earning more. The problem is what happens after you start earning more. From an early age, we're taught that financial stability means security. And in practice, security has become synonymous with having two incomes at home. Two paychecks represent protection against the unexpected, more comfort, and a theoretically calmer life. The script is familiar. Two people study, build careers, land good jobs, and together gain enough purchasing power to level up. A bigger house is no longer a distant dream. A better car feels justified. International trips become possible. Private schools enter the plan. The lifestyle adjusts to the new reality. None of this seems wrong. In fact, it feels like progress. The problem is that this model is rarely questioned. It's presented as the natural path of financial evolution. If you earn more, you should live better. If you can afford it, you should enjoy it. If the bank approves it, it must fit in the budget. But there's one question almost no one asks. Was this new lifestyle designed to generate freedom or just to keep up with income? Because when your lifestyle automatically rises along with your salary, something begins to change in your family's financial structure. And that's exactly where the trap starts to form, so subtly that it looks like normal growth. When income increases, wealth almost never increases first. What increases first is lifestyle. This phenomenon has a name, lifestyle inflation, and it works automatically. No one sits down at the table and consciously decides to double their fixed costs. It just happens. The rented apartment suddenly feels too small. A financed home seems like the natural next step. The economy car starts to feel incompatible with the new income. Simple restaurants give way to well-deserved experiences. The basic plan becomes premium. Public school becomes private. The neighborhood changes. Each individual decision feels justified. The problem is the cumulative effect. Before, a single income covered the expenses and still allowed some level of investing. Now, two incomes support a higher standard of living, but the margin remains small. Sometimes it's even smaller. What changed wasn't just consumption, it was the structure of fixed costs. And high fixed costs are different from occasional spending. They require constant maintenance. They don't shrink when you want them to. They don't negotiate during difficult times. And the higher the standard of living rises, the harder it becomes to go back. That's the invisible side of lifestyle inflation. It creates a new, acceptable minimum. What used to be a luxury becomes a necessity. What used to be an upgrade becomes an obligation. And when that obligation depends on two incomes working perfectly every single month, the equation starts to become fragile. Because at that point, you're not just living better, you're structurally committed to that new level. When your lifestyle rises, fixed costs rise with it. And this is where the second income stops being an advantage and starts becoming a structural requirement. A bigger house means a bigger and longer mortgage payment. 30-year loans are not uncommon. Two financed cars double the payments, insurance, maintenance, and taxes. Private schools create non-negotiable monthly commitments. More expensive health plans increase your permanent fixed expenses. What used to be flexible becomes mandatory. The bank helps fuel this process. It calculates your borrowing capacity based on your combined income. If you earn more together, you can finance more. If you can finance more, you get approved for more. And higher approval creates the illusion that everything is under control. But approval does not mean security. It simply means you've become eligible to take on more debt. The problem isn't debt itself, it's proportion. When fixed costs start depending on both incomes working perfectly every single month, you lose your margin for error. There's no room for pause, no room for transition, no room for prolonged setbacks. And high fixed costs have a dangerous trait. They're rigid when your income is unstable. If income drops, costs don't follow. That's when the structure reveals its fragility. What once looked like financial progress starts to feel like constant pressure. Because now you're not just working to grow, you're working to maintain. Over time, the market recognizes patterns, and when dual incomes become common within households, the entire system adjusts to that new reality. The housing market is one of the clearest examples. As couples began buying homes with combined incomes, average prices started reflecting that greater purchasing power. What used to be expensive for a single income became normal for two. The standard rose, not because houses necessarily got better, but because financing capacity increased. The same happens with credit, vehicles, and even social expectations. The bank's approved limit isn't based on financial prudence, it's based on statistical risk. If your combined income allows you to carry a certain payment, the system assumes you can afford it, even if that eliminates your safety margin. Over time, the average cost of living well begins to incorporate two incomes as the baseline, and this creates a silent effect. The extra income stops generating a competitive advantage and simply keeps you within the average standard. You work more, you earn more, but the cost of the game has also gone up. This doesn't mean the system is the villain, it simply reacts to incentives. When more money enters the market, prices adjust. And when prices adjust, the second income stops being a differentiator. It becomes a requirement. And when something that was supposed to be an advantage turns into a basic requirement, the structure begins to lose balance, especially when any variable slips out of control. As long as both incomes come in every month, the structure appears solid. The bills are paid, the loans stay current, the lifestyle is maintained. There's even a sense of stability. The problem is that this stability depends on a very specific condition: both incomes functioning without interruption. But real life doesn't move in a straight line. An unexpected layoff, a market downturn, an economic crisis, an unplanned pregnancy, a health issue, or simply extreme burnout after years of sustaining an intense work pace. When one income drops, the impact isn't proportional, it's structural, because fixed costs don't automatically decrease. The mortgage payment remains, the car payment remains, the school tuition remains, the health plan remains. The lifestyle built on two incomes now has to be supported by one. And in that moment, the real test of financial security appears. Truly resilient families can absorb the shock without panic. Dependent structures, however, immediately switch into survival mode, relying on credit, liquidating investments, rushing into renegotiations, making decisions under pressure. This is where the difference between apparent comfort and real security becomes clear. Comfort is when everything is working. Security is when something stops working and you remain stable. When two incomes are required just to maintain your lifestyle, any interruption becomes a threat. And it's precisely that dependence that turns an advantage into a vulnerability. There's a cost that almost never shows up on spreadsheets: the psychological cost. When your financial structure depends on two incomes functioning perfectly, silent pressure begins to build. It's not just about paying bills, it's about not being allowed to fail, not being allowed to slow down, not being allowed to pause. Two adults performing at a high level for years create a constant environment of tension. The routine accelerates, time becomes scarce, energy declines. And when exhaustion accumulates, financial decisions stop being strategic and start becoming emotional. Consumption begins to turn into compensation. After intense weeks of work, a sense of "we deserve this" appears. A more expensive dinner, a trip paid in installments, an upgrade because we work so hard. Small rewards that seem harmless but reinforce the cycle. Excessive work followed by consumption to relieve the very excess it creates. This cycle is dangerous because it keeps the structure intact. You continue working to sustain the lifestyle, and you sustain the lifestyle to justify the intense work. Over time, the goal stops being building freedom, the focus becomes maintaining the pace. And maintaining pace is different from growing. Prolonged exhaustion also reduces clarity. Under constant pressure, few people make bold and strategic financial decisions. They choose what feels safe, immediate, and comfortable. But comfort in this context is just maintenance. When two incomes support high costs, the risk isn't only financial, it's emotional. And emotionally pressured structures rarely build long-term wealth. There is a huge difference between high income and high net worth, and this is exactly where many dual-income families get confused. Income is flow, net worth is stock. Income pays for the present, net worth protects the future. When two people earn well, the monthly cash flow is strong. Bills are paid easily. The credit card rotates without major concern. The house is comfortable. The car is new. The trips happen. From the outside, everything looks stable, but stability based only on active income is fragile. If wealth depends exclusively on continuing to work at the same pace, then it isn't consolidated wealth, it's continuous performance. Many upper-middle-class families live exactly at this point. High lifestyle, low accumulated net worth. A lot of money coming in, little money consistently invested. A lot of focus on maintaining lifestyle, little focus on building assets that generate their own income. And that's the great illusion. Visually, life looks prosperous. Structurally, it depends on the next paycheck. Meanwhile, families who live at a more moderate standard but accumulate assets over the years build something invisible at first: independence. What differentiates these two groups isn't necessarily how much they earn, it's how they structure their lives around that income. If two incomes serve only to sustain consumption, net worth grows slowly. But if at least one of them is directed towards assets, the game changes completely. And this is exactly where the strategic alternative emerges. If two incomes can create vulnerability when they only sustain consumption, they can also become an extraordinary advantage when structured correctly. The strategic model is simple in theory, but powerful in practice. Live on one income and use the other to build assets. That completely changes the logic. When a single income is enough to cover housing, food, transportation, and essential expenses, the family creates margin. Margin generates peace of mind. Peace of mind generates clarity, and clarity allows for better financial decisions. The second income, in this scenario, stops being support for lifestyle and becomes an engine for wealth. Instead of financing an immediate lifestyle upgrade, it is directed towards consistent investments, funds, stocks, fixed income, businesses, income-generating assets. Over the years, that discipline creates a powerful compounding effect. Imagine investing $6,000 per month continuously for 10 years. Even with moderate returns, the accumulated amount begins to transform the family's financial structure. The focus shifts from dependence on the next paycheck to the construction of independence. What's most interesting is that this model reduces risk while accelerating growth. If one income drops, the basic structure continues to function. If both continue, net worth grows rapidly. The family stops depending exclusively on active work and begins building alternatives. This isn't about living extremely or giving up comfort forever. It's about creating a strategic period of intense building. For a few years, the discipline may feel like sacrifice, but in the long run, it buys freedom. And when freedom starts to become tangible, your perception of money changes completely. Because now you're not using two incomes to sustain the present, you're using one of them to buy the future.
Understanding the trap is the first step. Adjusting the structure is what truly changes the game. The shift begins with strategically reducing fixed costs. That doesn't mean dismantling the life you've built, but reviewing commitments that require constant dependence on two incomes. The lower your essential fixed costs, the greater your flexibility. The second step is simple and powerful. Never finance at the maximum amount you're approved for. The bank calculates statistical risk, not emotional stability. If you use your entire approved limit, you eliminate your margin before it even exists. Third, build an emergency fund based on the logic of one income. That means if one of them disappears, the family continues functioning without panic. Security isn't the absence of risk, it's the ability to absorb it. Fourth, before expanding your lifestyle, expand your assets. Grow your net worth before upgrading your standard of living. This reverses the common order and strengthens your foundation. And finally, consistently direct part of the second income toward assets that generate future cash flow. Investments, businesses, equity stakes, something that over time reduces dependence on active work. Escaping the trap doesn't require an immediate revolution. It requires strategy. Small structural decisions, repeated over the years, completely transform the outcome. And when the structure changes, the feeling of security stops being an illusion. It becomes real. Two incomes aren't the problem. They never were. The problem is when both are used only to sustain a lifestyle that demands constant performance, zero margin, and no pause. That's not security. That's sophisticated dependence. Real security is built through structure, by living below your maximum capacity, by turning income into assets, by building something that continues to function even when you slow down. Once you understand that, the logic changes. The second income stops being a justification to consume more and becomes a tool to gain freedom. And financial freedom doesn't mean quitting work tomorrow. It means having a choice. It means being able to decide. If this video made you rethink your financial structure, like it now and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, are you using two incomes to sustain a lifestyle or to build wealth? Because in the end, wealth isn't about how much comes in every month. It's about how much you build so you don't have to depend on it forever. And the decision starts now.